Have you ever walked into a room and realized you were the only one who didn't know the script? That's how it started. I was standing there in that fluorescent-lit room, with its beige walls and metal folding chairs, surrounded by smiling faces. Familiar faces. People I'd seen trimming their hedges or jogging with their golden retrievers. People who waved, who brought me cookies when I first moved in. And yet, in that moment, every single one of them was a stranger. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. Then she touched my arm. Nancy. White hair swept into a perfect chignon, navy blouse starched within an inch of its life. Her hand was cold and deliberate as she leaned close and said, "You've been very patient." I froze. The room nodded. Not just a couple people, all of them. As if she had spoken for them all. As if they'd all been waiting for that moment. For me. And the worst part? I didn't know what the hell she was talking about. I laughed. A short, awkward exhale. "Sorry," I said, looking around. Did I miss something? No one answered. They just looked. That kind of quiet? It's not the absence of sound. It's a pressure. A weight behind your ears. You start to feel your own heartbeat. You start to feel watched. And then he stood up. He hadn't said a word until then. Sat there in the corner of the circle, hands folded, eyes down. But when he stood, the room shifted. It was like someone flipped a switch. A hush fell that felt too perfect. No shuffling. No throat clearing. Like they'd rehearsed this before. He looked right at me. And then he spoke. But I'll get to what he said. Because before that moment, before that strange meeting that felt like an ambush wrapped in a welcome mat, I thought this place was just another quiet, safe neighborhood. You know the kind. Green lawns. Mailboxes with tiny flags. HOA letters about improper hedge heights. The sort of place where nothing weird ever happens. I thought I knew what normal looked like. But let me back up. Let me show you how I got here. Because this story doesn't start at the meeting. It starts 14 months earlier. With a quiet move-in, a kind neighbor, and a cake. When I first pulled onto Magnolia Lane, I was already second-guessing myself. The moving truck was late. The real estate agent ghosted me halfway through escrow. And the house, cute as it was, had a weird smell. Not bad. Not mildewy or gross. Just old. Like books and dust and something else I couldn't place. But the porch swing was charming. The trees lined the street like sentinels. It felt quiet. I wanted quiet. After the city, after him, after everything, this place felt like a reset button. Somewhere I could breathe. Think. Heal, maybe. That's what I told myself anyway. The house was a 3-bedroom craftsman style with ivy that curled around the front trellis. I was 34, single, no kids, no pets. Just me and a job I could do from anywhere with Wi-Fi and decent coffee. And this place had both. At least, I thought it did. The first odd thing happened before I unpacked a single box. There was a cake. It was on the kitchen counter. Round. Frosted. Wrapped in plastic with a yellow sticky note. "Welcome to the neighborhood, Claire." I blinked. I hadn't told anyone I was moving in that day. Not even the agent. My schedule had changed last minute. So how? I chalked it up to small-town vibes. Maybe the previous owner had passed along the info. Maybe it was just a neighborly tradition. No big deal. I didn't eat it. Not because I thought it was poisoned or anything. It just felt off. Like someone had walked inside without knocking. A line crossed I didn't know I'd drawn. But I told myself to chill. People were just nice here. Over the next few weeks, things settled into a rhythm. Sort of. Nancy came by first. Late 50s, maybe 60, a little too polished for everyday errands. She introduced herself with a lavender-scented handshake and a tote full of zucchini from her garden. "You must be Claire," she said. I blinked. "Yeah. How'd you?" "Oh, word travels," she said, smiling. "We keep an eye out for our own around here." That phrase stuck with me. Our own. I didn't ask what she meant. I was still trying to be polite. Make a good impression. Then came Glenn. Tall. Awkward. Lived 2 houses down. always wearing the same faded jeans and flannel shirt, even when it was 90 degrees. He never said much, but I caught him watching me more than once. From across the street. From behind his mailbox. Once from his roof. Yeah, his roof. I waved. He waved back. That was it. Another time, I walked outside to find my trash cans already at the curb. I hadn't taken them out. Small town kindness, right? I told myself that. Even when it happened again. And again. Even when I started waking up to find my porch swept. My flowers watered. A bag of lemons left on my doormat. All from anonymous neighbors. And still, I told myself this was just a sweet, overly involved neighborhood. I wanted to believe that. Until the flyers started showing up. It was mid-September when I got the first one. Folded neatly in my mailbox. Community Harmony Circle, meeting Thursday night, 7 p.m. Attendance encouraged. Plain text. No contact info. No RSVP. I tossed it. A week later, another appeared. Then another. Same message. Same time. Just different paper. And always the same phrasing. Attendance encouraged. Not invited. Not welcome. Encouraged. Subtle, right? I didn't go. But one Thursday night, I sat in the dark with the windows cracked open, listening. Around 7:04 p.m., the street went dead quiet. No dogs. No cars. Just silence. Then a low hum. Like chanting. I slammed the window shut. Told myself it was nothing. But I barely slept. The next morning, someone had left a note on my windshield. 4 words. It's time, Claire. Typed. Centered. No signature. I checked the driveway cameras. Nothing. No movement. Just a dead zone between 2:13 and 2:19 a.m. Footage skipped like an old VHS tape. That's when I started keeping the lights on. That's when I stopped feeling safe. You ever feel like a whole group of people knows something about you that you don't? That's the kind of feeling you can't shake. It eats at you. Makes you second-guess every polite smile. Every wave. Every batch of brownies handed across the fence. It makes you wonder what's really going on. So I caved. I went to the meeting. Not because I wanted to. Because I had to know. The community center was exactly what you'd expect. Brown brick. Bulletin board outside with faded event flyers. A parking lot too big for the building. I walked in 5 minutes late. The chairs were already in a circle. Every seat taken. Except one. Mine. It had a paper on it. Claire, listener. No last name. No mistake. They were waiting. Nancy smiled when she saw me. Patted the chair next to her. Good girl, she said softly. You've been very patient. That's when she touched my arm. And that's when the nodding started. A synchronized, silent agreement. Like they all knew the next step. Except me. I tried to speak, but my throat went dry. I looked around, hoping for anyone, who looked as confused as I felt. But their faces were serene. Expectant. Then the man in the corner stood. I hadn't noticed him before. He'd been too still. Too quiet. Mid-40s. Clean-shaven. Crisp gray button-down. The kind of man you'd never notice at a grocery store, but wouldn't forget if he looked at you the way he looked at me now. Direct. Unblinking. Knowing. He stepped into the center of the circle and said, in a calm, even tone, "Now we begin." And that? That was the moment everything I thought I understood shattered. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. Have you ever had the feeling that someone was watching you? Not the kind of watching that happens when you trip in public or spill coffee on yourself. I'm talking about the kind of watching you can't prove. The kind that lives just outside your vision. The kind that makes your skin itch and your chest tighten, even though there's nothing technically there. That's how it felt on Magnolia Lane. At first, I told myself it was just nerves. Moving to a new place, being alone, getting used to unfamiliar routines. But there was a moment, clear as glass, when I stopped pretending. It was the night I saw Glenn on the roof. He lived 2 houses down, remember? The tall one with the worn flannel shirts and the eyes that never seemed to blink. He wasn't exactly warm, but he always waved, always looked like he had something to say and never quite said it. One night, I took out the trash around 11. I remember because it had been one of those stupidly long workdays where my laptop overheated and my client ghosted me mid-presentation. I was tired, cranky, barefoot, and that's when I saw him. Sitting on the edge of his roof, knees up, arms resting on them. Like some kind of gargoyle in plaid. No flashlight. No tools. Just sitting there. Looking down the street. Looking at me. I froze. He didn't wave this time. Just nodded once. Then turned his head and stared at the sky. What would you have done? I backed inside. Closed the door. Locked it. And that's when I realized something else. My trash bins? They were already out. I hadn't taken them to the curb yet. I hadn't even touched them. And yet there they were, perfectly aligned at the edge of my driveway, lids shut, handles out. Like someone had done it for me. Again. Now I know what you're thinking. Kind neighbor. Acts of service. Old school gentleman. That's what I wanted to think too. But that wasn't the only thing that kept happening. My porch light would turn off on its own. The front door would click shut when I was upstairs, even if I was sure I hadn't left it open. There were nights I could swear I heard footsteps on my deck. Not loud. Not threatening. Just soft. Pacing. I bought a camera. You know, one of those motion sensor ones you can link to your phone. It never caught a thing. Not one single thing. Except for once. And that time? It scared the hell out of me. It was early October. 3:13 a.m. I woke up to a motion alert. The footage was 37 seconds long. The screen showed the porch. Empty. Then, 6 seconds in, something flickered. Not a figure. Not a face. Just a blur. A distortion. Like heat on pavement or water behind glass. Then, at second 22, a voice. Clear. Calm. You're almost ready. That's it. No body. No shadow. Just those 3 words. I played it again. And again. Slowed it down. Cranked the brightness. Even called customer support. They said it was a glitch. What do you think? The next day, Glenn waved at me again. Same old flannel. Same half smile. I tried to act normal. Pretended I didn't think he was sitting on his roof in the middle of the night. Pretended I didn't hear disembodied voices on my security cam. But he walked over, stood by the edge of my lawn, and said something that stopped me cold. You ever forget something important? He asked. I hesitated. Sure. All the time. He nodded. Some things you forget on purpose, though. For your own good. What's that supposed to mean? I asked. He shrugged. Tomorrow, you'll understand. Then he walked off. Just like that. No explanation. No follow-up. I stood there for a long time, staring after him. Because something in his voice wasn't warning. It was certainty. Like he already knew the outcome. That was the same day I got the 4th flyer. Same header, Community Harmony Circle. Same time. Thursday, 7 p.m. Same phrase, attendance encouraged. Only this time, it wasn't in the mailbox. It was taped to my bathroom mirror. Inside my house. I live alone. Do you see what I'm saying yet? This wasn't small-town charm. It wasn't friendly neighbors. It was something else. Something coordinated. Deliberate. And I was in the middle of it. I started looking closer. At everything. Glenn wasn't the only one watching. Mrs. Cortez from across the street? She always sat by her front window knitting, but never once did I see her mess up a stitch or even glance down at the yarn. The teenage twins, Milo and Ezra? They rode their bikes back and forth past my house 4 times every day. Same route. Same time. Same wide eyes. And Nancy? She always seemed to know what I was going to say before I said it. You look tired today, Claire, she'd say, even if I hadn't seen her in a week. Oh, I didn't forget you don't like cinnamon, she once said, handing me a sugar cookie before I even mentioned allergies. It was like I was on a stage, and they were all reading from the same script. But I didn't have my lines. Then came the final push. It was a Wednesday night. Cold. Windless. I was heading to bed when I noticed a glow coming from Glenn's house. Not a light. Not a lamp. A blue pulse. Dim, rhythmic. It flickered through his garage window. Something told me to go look. Not curiosity. Not fear. Something else. Like I was supposed to. So I did. I threw on a hoodie, slipped out barefoot, crossed the street. No one else was out. The garage door was halfway open. Enough to duck under. Inside was quiet. Too quiet. But what I saw, I'm still not sure how to explain it. The walls were covered in notes. Sticky notes. Pages torn from notebooks. Photographs. Diagrams. Names. One corner of the wall was completely dedicated to me. Photos of me raking leaves. Checking the mail. Sitting at my kitchen table. Times were labeled beneath each. 7:16 p.m. 11:42 p.m. 3:13 a.m. Dates were noted. Weather. Mood indicators. Tired. Distracted. Anxious. And under one? Awakening begins. There were maps of the neighborhood. Lines drawn between houses. Patterns marked in red. And in the middle of it all, a circle. My house was dead center. In the center of the garage, surrounded by all this, stood a small pedestal. On it, a small black book. Leather-bound. Worn. And embossed on the cover? My name, Claire Winston. I didn't touch it. I should have. But I didn't. Because right then, I heard the soft crunch of gravel behind me. I turned. Glenn stood there. Calm. No flannel tonight, just a gray shirt like the man from the meeting. He looked at the board, then at me. You weren't supposed to see this yet, he said. What the hell is this? I asked, my voice shaking. He looked almost sad. It's not about you, Claire, he said. It's about what's inside you. I took a step back. What the hell does that mean? He didn't answer. He just nodded toward the book. You'll remember soon. I ran. Didn't stop until I was inside, door locked, heart pounding. I didn't sleep that night. Because no matter how I tried to explain it away, one truth echoed in my mind. This wasn't just about me. It never was. But what came next would tear down everything I thought I knew, and I was already too far in to escape. Do you remember the moment you felt truly out of place? Like the rules of reality had shifted, but no one sent you the memo? That was me, standing in my hallway at 2:07 in the morning, heart pounding, lights off, phone in hand, trying to convince myself I hadn't just seen a surveillance shrine in my neighbor's garage dedicated to my life. I didn't call the police. Why? Because what would I even say? Hi, yes, I'd like to report my neighbor for making a timeline of my laundry habits. Can you send someone over to arrest a guy for watching me too politely? No, that wasn't going to cut it. And here's the truth I was afraid to say out loud. Part of me already knew it wouldn't matter. Because this was bigger than Glenn. And I was already part of it. The next morning, I didn't leave my house. Not for work. Not for coffee. Not even to get the mail. I pulled the blinds. Locked every door twice. And just watched. You ever do that? Just sit behind a curtain and watch the world pretend everything's normal? The neighborhood was exactly the same. Lawn sprinklers ticked on at 7 a.m. sharp. Dogs barked at passing cars. Mr. Grady took his morning walk in that same ugly orange windbreaker he always wore. But now I saw the rhythm. The pattern. Like the entire street was on a loop. At 9:06 a.m., Nancy walked down the sidewalk and paused outside my house. She didn't knock. Didn't wave. She just looked up at my window and smiled. Like she knew I was watching. I dropped to the floor like a soldier under fire. Yeah, real brave, I know. But then I heard it. A soft thud. I waited a few minutes, then peeked through the mail slot. There was a plate on my porch. A cookie. Just one. Wrapped in plastic. With a new note. You're remembering more. Good. That was the second time in 24 hours someone implied I'd forgotten something. So now I had questions. Real ones. What exactly was I supposed to be remembering? Let me take you back, because this didn't start with the cake or the flyers or even Glenn. It started before I ever moved in. The night I first toured the house. I was exhausted. I had just driven 6 hours to get there, and the realtor canceled last minute. Said something vague about a family thing, but she told me where the key was hidden. Under a ceramic owl in the flower bed. Go take a look, she said. I did. The house was empty, silent, but it didn't feel abandoned. It felt watched. I walked through the living room, into the kitchen, and stopped dead. There was a candle burning on the counter. Lit. Unattended. Next to it, a note. In my handwriting. I like it here. I should have left. I know that now. I should have called someone, anyone. But instead, I stood there and stared at the note for a full 5 minutes. Then I folded it, put it in my pocket, and signed the offer letter the next morning. Why? Because I couldn't shake the feeling that I was supposed to be there. That this place had been waiting for me. Back in the present, I decided to test something. I went to the fridge, grabbed the cookie Nancy left, the one with the note, and broke it in half. Perfectly soft. Still warm. I didn't eat it. Instead, I put it in a plastic bag and drove 15 minutes to the next town over. To a friend of mine, Mia, who works in a chemistry lab. I didn't explain much. Just said, "Can you test this? See if there's anything weird in it." She agreed, a little confused, but said it would take a day or two. I never got those results. Because by then, everything had already shifted. That night, just after sundown, I sat outside on my porch with the lights off. I needed to see what happened after dark. If the rhythm changed. If anyone slipped up. At 7:16 p.m., right on schedule, the man with the golden retriever walked past. He didn't look at me, but his dog did. The golden retriever stopped at the edge of my driveway, sat down, and stared at me. Not barked, not wagged its tail, just stared. Then the man tugged the leash once, and the dog stood and walked on, like it was trained. I stood up, heart in my throat, and scanned the street. Everything looked normal. Too normal. That's when I saw it. There was a shape. In the window of the empty house across the street. The house that had been for sale for over a year. A figure. Perfectly still. Just watching. The next morning, I tried to talk to someone. Anyone. I picked the most normal person I could think of, Allison, the schoolteacher next door. Mid-30s, sweet, always left little seasonal decorations outside. Pumpkin garlands. Wreaths. That kind of thing. I asked her, "Hey, can I ask you something weird?" She smiled. "Of course. Do you ever feel like people around here know more than they should?" Her smile didn't falter. She just tilted her head and said, "Oh, Claire. You'll feel much better once you stop asking questions." I blinked. "Excuse me." She reached out, adjusted one of the fake pumpkins on her porch. Curiosity creates noise. And this neighborhood? We're built on quiet. Then she picked up her watering can, walked inside, and closed the door. That was the moment I knew. I was completely, terrifyingly alone. I spent the next 2 hours pacing my house, digging through drawers, rereading every note I'd found. Trying to connect dots that didn't want to connect. Why me? Why this house? What was inside me that Glenn had mentioned? And what did they mean by remembering? That's when I remembered the binder. It had been hidden behind the washer. I'd found it months ago while installing a shelf but never opened it. Just assumed it was something left by the previous owner. I pulled it out. Plain black, dusty, no label. Inside? Pages of my handwriting. Or at least, it looked like mine. Dozens of pages. Entries. Observations. Dates. And at the top of each one. Integration progress. Subject, Claire Winston. I flipped through. Page after page. Claire responded well to passive environmental shifts. Emotional triggers, increasing recall incidents. Verbal cue, you've been very patient, effective in 4 of 5 trials. I dropped the binder. Because I didn't write those. At least. I didn't remember writing them. But my signature was at the bottom of every page. That's when I realized. This wasn't the welcome I'd thought it was. This wasn't a neighborhood. It was a system. And I was at the center of it. I stared at the last page. One line had been added in red ink. Phase 2 begins tomorrow. And the date? Was today. But what they had planned for Phase 2 would make everything before it feel like a gentle nudge. And there was no turning back now. How do you confront someone who's been quietly collecting pieces of your life without ever asking your permission? Because that's what I saw. Photos of me taken through windows. Diagrams tracking my movements. Lists of my daily habits. Handwriting that looked like mine but spoke like a stranger. A binder hidden behind my own washing machine with integration progress stamped across it like I was a lab rat in my own story. And all of it led to one place. Glenn. The quiet neighbor. The guy who never spoke unless spoken to. The one with the garage that glowed blue at night and eyes that didn't blink. So the next night, I did what any terrified, completely irrational person would do. I went back. Why? Because if this was a game, I wanted the rulebook. I wanted to see what he'd say when I confronted him face to face. I wanted him to know I knew. I wanted answers. But what I got instead was something much worse. It started exactly at 11:11 p.m. I remember the time because I'd been watching the clock, hand frozen on the doorknob. Glenn's garage light flicked on. Soft blue again. The same gentle, pulsing rhythm. Almost like breathing. I crossed the street barefoot. It was quiet, too quiet. Even the usual crickets seemed to stop for this. His garage was halfway open again. Just like before. And inside? It looked exactly the same. The board. The photographs. My name written over and over again in red, blue, and black ink. Pages pinned to walls, curling slightly at the corners from heat or time or just use. It didn't look like a project. It looked like worship. The pedestal was still there. Still holding the small black book with my name embossed in gold. The letters shimmered slightly in the light, like they'd been recently polished. I reached for it this time. And just as my fingertips brushed the leather, I heard a voice behind me. "You're early tonight." I turned slowly. Glenn stood just inside the garage, arms relaxed, eyes soft, but unreadable. "I didn't know there was a schedule," I said, keeping my voice steady. "There always is," he replied. "Even if you don't remember it yet." "Stop saying that. What the hell am I supposed to be remembering?" He didn't flinch. Instead, he stepped forward and, without asking, picked up the book and opened it. Entry 1, he read aloud. Subject agreed to full memory suspension. Duration, 12 months. Trigger phrases implanted. Environment prepared. He looked at me. "You signed off on this. You started it." "I didn't," I said quickly. "I didn't sign anything. I never." "You did," Glenn interrupted gently. "Just not that you standing here right now. What would you even say to that? How do you argue with someone who claims the real you is someone you've never met?" I stepped back. "Why me?" He closed the book. "Because you asked us to." He gestured to the board. "This isn't surveillance, Claire. It's guidance. Support. We weren't watching you. We were maintaining you." I stared at him, trying to read between the lines. "Maintaining me, for what?" Glenn sighed. "You really don't remember anything?" "No." He nodded slowly, almost sadly. "Then I can't answer yet. But soon. It's almost time." "For what?" Instead of answering, Glenn reached into his back pocket and pulled out a silver object the size of a key fob. He pressed it once. The room changed. Not the lighting. Not the temperature. The air. It vibrated. And the wall, one of the garage walls, shimmered and flickered. And then it wasn't a wall anymore. It was a screen. A projection. And on it was me. A video. I was sitting at the community center table. Smiling. Leaning forward like I was in on the joke. Like I belonged there. In the video, I was laughing with Nancy. Glenn was there too. So were others, people I hadn't even realized lived on our street. And I was leading it. I was explaining something. I couldn't hear the sound, but I could see my lips moving. Pointing to a diagram. Of a person. Me. Then, on the screen, I signed a paper. Then looked at the camera and said something to the camera. To myself. To the version of me standing in Glenn's garage right now. He paused the video. "That was 12 months ago," Glenn said quietly. "You were the architect of the cycle. You chose to be the next subject. And now, we're at the end of your year. I would never. You said that last time too. That shut me up. Because in my gut, in that slow, churning place between fear and understanding, I knew he was telling the truth. Even if it didn't make sense. Even if it hurt. I need you to come to the next meeting," Glenn said, more gently now. "We're not your enemies, Claire. We're your mirror." I stared at the paused frame on the screen. My own face frozen mid-smile. confident, happy, powerful, and nothing like I felt now. I need time, I whispered. Glenn nodded. Time is the one thing you don't really have, Claire. But I understand. He stepped aside, like a host showing someone to the door. I left the garage, heart pounding, vision swimming, unsure whether I was walking back to my house or deeper into something I had once helped build. The street was quiet again. Too quiet. Because now I knew none of it had ever been random. Not the cake. Not the cookies. Not even Glenn. Especially not Glenn. When I got home, I locked the doors. Checked them twice. Then I sat on my bed and stared at the binder again. Because something Glenn said echoed louder than the rest. This isn't surveillance, Claire. It's support. So if they weren't watching to manipulate me, what were they protecting me from? That night, I dreamt of a forest. A dark one. Silent. And in the middle of it, there was a figure wrapped in something that shimmered. Like a robe made of broken glass. It stood with its arms open. Waiting. And I stepped toward it. When I woke up, there was a new note under my pillow. Just one word. Soon. But soon wasn't the scariest part. It was who put it there while I slept. Have you ever walked into a room that you swear you've never seen before, but your body reacts like it's been there 100 times? That's what it felt like when I stepped inside the community center. Déjà vu with teeth. I hadn't been back since the night Nancy touched my arm, since the nods, since the man, Elias, stood up and spoke those first words that cracked reality open. Now here I was again. And this time, I walked in on time. The room was already arranged. 12 metal folding chairs in a perfect circle. Soft yellow light buzzed overhead. The kind that hums just low enough to make you wonder if you're hearing it or imagining it. Each chair had a name tag. In big, clear letters. Glenn. Nancy. Ezra. Claire. Listener. There it was again. Listener. Not member. Not resident. Not even participant. Just listener. I hovered near the entrance. Half a step from leaving. The kind of step you never actually take because you already know it's too late. Nancy saw me first. She was sitting perfectly upright, hands folded in her lap like a schoolteacher at assembly. She smiled when our eyes met. You made it, she said, like I'd just arrived for coffee. Did I have a choice? I asked. Always, she replied. But some choices have already been made. And some have yet to come. That answer made me want to scream. Instead, I sat down. The chair was colder than I expected. No one spoke. They all just looked at me, smiling. Calm. Too calm. And then, right on cue, because everything in this town happened on cue, Elias walked in. The same man from before. Clean-shaven. Neatly dressed. Calm as a monk with a gun under the robe. He didn't speak immediately. Just looked around the circle. Let the silence stretch. Let the tension crawl under my skin like static. Then he nodded once, stepped into the center of the circle and said, Now we remember. And suddenly everyone closed their eyes. Even Glenn. Even Nancy. Everyone except me. Close your eyes, Claire, Elias said softly. I didn't move. What happens if I don't? You'll still remember. But it'll hurt more. I hesitated. Then closed them. And what I saw wasn't a memory. Not exactly. It was like standing behind a curtain and watching a play. A show written by someone who knew every detail of your life. But twisted just enough to make you question what was real and what was performance. I saw myself, months ago, sitting at this same meeting. Smiling. Confident. I was leading a discussion. About the next cycle. The words came in fragments. She's ready. She won't remember until she's safe. Integration depends on environment and resistance. The listener always comes home. I opened my eyes. Everyone else was still deep in, whatever that was. Except Elias. He was watching me. You're remembering, he said. I'm seeing things, I snapped. It's not the same. It is, he replied. You just don't trust yourself yet. I stood. Tell me what this is. Tell me what I agreed to. What I am. Elias didn't blink. You're the failsafe. What does that even mean? He stepped forward, quiet, deliberate. Every cycle requires one person who can forget. Who can experience things for the first time again? Who can observe without bias, without fear, without conditioning? Why? To keep the system balanced. My heart thudded. You're saying I volunteered to be gaslit for a year? Elias almost smiled. Not gaslit. Enlightened. There's a difference. I felt my hands clench into fists. He raised one finger. You asked for this, Claire. You designed the test. You set the parameters. And you said, very clearly, that if you tried to fight it when the time came, we were not to stop you. My head spun. None of it made sense. All of it made sense. I sat down. Because I needed to hear more. Everyone opened their eyes at once. No one spoke. Then Glenn reached into a bag beside his chair and pulled out a folded cloth. He handed it to me. It was deep blue, silky, embroidered with silver thread in the shape of a circle. Inside the circle, a name. Mine. Below it, a single word. Awakened. What is this? I asked. Nancy spoke this time. Your role is ending. But I just... No, she interrupted gently. You just think you started. But this has been going on much longer than a year. I looked at her. How long? She didn't answer. But Glenn did. You've been through 3 cycles. This is your 4th. I felt like I couldn't breathe. 3 years? 4? Of forgetting and remembering and forgetting again? Why would anyone choose this? Why me? I whispered. Why not someone else? Elias answered. Because you're the only one who can hold it all without breaking. And then he handed me something. A slip of paper. Thin. Folded into a triangle. I unfolded it. Inside was a date. One I didn't recognize. And a location. The forest. Magnolia Hollow. Go there, Elias said. Everything that hasn't come back yet will. I left the meeting in a daze. The neighborhood looked the same. Sprinklers. Lights. Lawn chairs. But I knew now none of it was real in the way I thought. This place wasn't just a neighborhood. It was a design. A living blueprint for something else. And I was the test subject who designed her own maze and begged to be dropped in with no map. The part that terrified me? I could feel myself starting to agree with it. I got home around 9:30 p.m. And waiting for me on the kitchen table was a candle. Same as the one from the first night I toured the house. Lit. Flickering. Next to it, a new note. This time, written in my actual handwriting. Not a forgery. Not a fake. But undeniably mine. 4 words. You're not done yet. And I knew, without needing anyone to explain, the next part would break something. In me. Or in the world I thought I lived in. Because the forest wasn't just a location. It was the beginning. Again. Have you ever heard someone speak and felt your entire body freeze, not because of what they said, but because of what your soul seemed to remember? Like their voice wasn't reaching your ears. It was reaching through you. Unlocking doors you didn't know you'd locked. Maybe even built. That's what happened when Elias started talking. He stood at the center of the circle, one hand behind his back, the other gently raised like a conductor ready to cue the first note. And then he spoke. Calm. Even. No flair. But every syllable hit like a hammer on glass. The listener has returned. Everyone in the circle bowed their heads. Except me. Because I was too busy trying to keep breathing. You don't remember the last cycle, Elias continued, looking straight at me. That's not unusual. It's designed to feel foreign. Disjointed. Wrong. His gaze sharpened. Do you feel wrong, Claire? I didn't answer. I couldn't. My throat had sealed shut. He stepped closer, slow and deliberate. Do you feel like you're not who you were before? Yes, I whispered, the word escaping before I could stop it. Good. He turned to the others. She's ready. Now let me explain something. Up until this point, I still had one tiny thread I was clinging to. A belief that this was some kind of elaborate psychological experiment. Maybe a weird cult-like community ritual, sure, but something I could rationalize. Not anymore. Because when Elias began to speak in that language, not language? That's when the ground dropped out from under everything I thought I knew. The syllables didn't make sense. Not in English. Not in any language I've ever studied. And I studied linguistics in college. I've heard Sanskrit, Aramaic, even reconstructed proto-languages. This wasn't any of those. It was older. Raw. Like sound itself was trying to crawl inside my mind and rewrite the code. And it worked. Because as Elias spoke, I started to feel something unravel. In my head. In my chest. In my memories. I remembered a woman's face. Mine. But not me. Wearing white. Smiling. Standing in the same room, but it looked different. Darker. Wooden walls. Candles. No electricity. And then. Gone. Snapped back to the present like a rubber band to the wrist. Elias stopped speaking. I was shaking. And everyone else? Calm. Peaceful. Glenn smiled at me. Nancy wiped a tear from her eye. Ezra, the teenage boy from down the street, whispered. She heard it this time. What was I hearing? What had I been missing? And what was I on the verge of remembering? Elias looked at me again. There's a reason it feels like you don't belong. Because I don't, I said. I never did. No, he said. Because you're the only one who ever truly did. That's why you keep leaving. That made me pause. Leaving? This isn't your first cycle, Claire. Or your second. It's your eighth. My pulse dropped. You said fourth. That's what you were ready to hear. Until now. Elias raised a hand and snapped his fingers. The lights dimmed. And from the ceiling, a small projector dropped down. It whirred once and clicked on. The far wall lit up with video footage. And there I was again. Older. Younger. Shorter hair. Different clothes. Always me. Sitting in the same circle. Saying different things. Laughing. Arguing. Crying. One video showed me storming out. Another showed me returning with a necklace in my hand, holding it up like a key. And then one clip. Grainy and broken, showed me standing exactly where Elias stood now. Addressing a room full of listeners. I was him. Once. What is this? I asked, voice barely audible. This is the truth, he said. You created the loop. You initiated the memory fracture. You recruited us, trained us, and built this neighborhood as a container for the test. What test? The human core. Elias pointed at my chest. The part of you that remains no matter how much you forget. The part that chooses. I didn't understand. Or maybe I did. And I didn't want to. I looked around the room. Nancy. Glenn. Ezra. Allison. People I had passed in driveways. Chatted with at mailboxes. Waved to during afternoon walks. And now? They weren't neighbors. They were keepers. Of me. Elias stepped closer. You created this because you were afraid. Of what? Yourself. I backed up a step. He nodded slowly. You reached a point no one else had. You evolved past the need for memory. But with that came isolation. You told us that if you were ever to lose the last thread of who you were, you needed to be brought back. And you all just agreed? It was an honor. I stared at him. Why me? He smiled. You were the first. I felt sick. The first what? The first what, Elias? But I didn't ask. Because part of me already knew the answer. And it terrified me. I left the meeting on unsteady feet. The stars outside were too still. The air too quiet. Like the world was holding its breath. Back at my house, the lights were already on. Had I left them that way? The candle was still burning. But now there were three. In a triangle on the kitchen table. And a folded page between them. From the black book I saw in Glenn's garage. It read, "The final stage begins in the hollow." That was it. No signature. No instruction. Just a statement. But here's the part that really got me. The moment I read it, I felt a pull. Not emotional. Not symbolic. Physical. Like something deep in the earth had taken notice. And was calling me home. The forest. Magnolia Hollow. I didn't know what waited for me there. But I knew what Elias would say if I asked. You've always known. And this time? He might be right. Have you ever remembered something that couldn't possibly be yours? Not a dream. Not a memory from childhood. Something older. Like a ghost planted it. Or like it belonged to someone else, but you felt it anyway. I was driving to Magnolia Hollow. headlights slicing through the trees. The same 3 words circling in my mind. The final stage. I didn't remember how to get there. I never Googled directions. I never needed to. My hands just knew. Turn here. Slow down now. Brake. And there it was. The sign was almost invisible, buried in vines, half-rotted, sun-bleached wood with faded letters. Magnoliaholloww. Established. 1817. The road dipped into blackness after that. No streetlights. No tire marks. No sound except the crunch of gravel beneath me and my own breathing, sharp and too fast. But the worst part? The deeper I went, the louder my memories became. And I don't mean that metaphorically. I mean I heard them. Whispers. Laughter. My voice, speaking words I didn't recognize. I pulled into a clearing just past a broken fence. The hollow opened up like a wound. Massive trees wrapped in vines. Stone markers etched with runes. A wide circle in the dirt, flattened like something heavy had landed there or had been there for a long, long time. At the center, a stone table. Rough. Ancient. Covered in moss and strange carvings. I approached it slowly. And with every step, I felt pieces of myself waking up. Like I wasn't just Claire. I was every Claire who had come before. Every cycle. Every version. And they were all screaming to be let back in. I reached the table and laid a hand on it. Cold. But familiar. Immediately, the world blurred. One blink, and the forest changed. The trees grew taller. The sky dimmed. The carvings on the table glowed. And around me? Figures. Not quite people. Not quite shadows. 12 of them. Forming a circle, just like the chairs. But here, there were no names. Only presence. One stepped forward. A woman. Tall. White dress. Black eyes like obsidian marbles. "You're late," she said. Her voice was mine. Not similar. Mine. I opened my mouth to speak, but nothing came out. She raised her hand and placed it on my forehead. And in an instant, I remembered. Not all of it, but enough to split me in half. I remembered walking into this forest barefoot. I remembered cutting my palm and placing it on the stone. I remembered whispering a promise. To return. To forget. To remember. To choose again. This wasn't a town. It was a machine. And I was its engine. The community. The neighbors. The cycles. They weren't keeping me in. They were keeping something else out. Something I had let in once, before I knew what it was. And the only way to hold it back was to forget myself. The woman in white stepped back. "You've bled through early," she said. "What does that mean?" "Your memory. It's leaking between cycles now. The illusion won't hold much longer." "What illusion?" "That this is about you." That hit like a slap. "What is this about then?" She didn't answer. She just pointed to the trees behind me. I turned and saw myself. Not metaphorically. Not symbolically. Me. Another version of me. Standing just at the tree line. Dirty feet. Blank stare. Hair tangled like she'd been living here for months. She didn't blink. Didn't move. But I knew what I was looking at. She was me before remembering. And she hadn't made it back. I turned back to the table, but the woman was gone. So were the figures. The forest dimmed. The glow faded. But the truth stayed. Burned into my skin. I stumbled back to the car and drove on instinct. By the time I got home, it was just after 3 a.m. The house was dark. Except for one room. The laundry room. Light on. Door wide open. I stepped inside. And on the floor? The binder. Open. New pages had been added. But this time, they weren't written to me. They were written by me. To someone else. To the next one. I picked it up, hands shaking. The most recent entry read, "She is close to breaking. But the boundary is weaker now. We must end this." And under it. Next cycle must begin immediately. Delay risks exposure. I dropped it. Because suddenly, I wasn't scared for myself anymore. I was scared of what I might do. What I had done. The doorbell rang. Once. Twice. I opened the front door, and there they were. All of them. Nancy, Glenn, Elias, Ezra, Allison, lined up neatly on my porch. Not smiling, not nodding, just watching, waiting. Elias stepped forward. "It's time to decide," he said. "You've seen behind the curtain. You know who you are. What you've done." I didn't answer. He held out a small vial. Clear liquid. Swirling slightly, like it was alive. "If you take this," he said, "the cycle resets. You return to peace. One more year of quiet. One more chance to not remember. And if I don't?" Elias looked into my eyes. And for the first time, I saw fear. "Then we face what's coming. Together. With full memory. Full weight. No more resets." I looked past him to the others. Some hopeful. Some afraid. Some resigned. What would you do? Start over, safe but blind? Or face the truth, broken and dangerous? I didn't speak. I just reached out. And took the vial. But not the way he expected. I didn't drink it. I crushed it in my fist. Glass and all. And whispered. "Then show me who I was." Because I was done being the listener. Now I needed to become the one who remembered everything. What would you do if the world around you, your neighbors, your job, your memories, all turned out to be part of a story you wrote, but forgot? And what if that story was a lie? That's where I was now. Standing on my porch in the middle of the night, a shattered vial bleeding silver liquid into my palm, 12 faces staring at me, faces I thought I knew, but that now looked like masks, waiting for a cue. Elias's expression didn't change. Not surprise. Not anger. Just recognition. Like he knew this moment was always coming. He spoke softly, calmly. "You understand what this means?" I looked at the glinting shards in my hand. "Yeah, it means I'm not going back to sleep." A long silence. Then Nancy stepped forward. For the first time, her voice shook. "No one has ever refused after remembering." "Maybe they should have," I said. She flinched. Elias stepped back and gestured to the others. They formed a loose semicircle around me. I felt boxed in. But not physically. It was something deeper. Like the space itself was bending around their presence. "You've fractured the loop," Elias said. "The decision can't be undone." I laughed, bitter. "Good. And that's when everything stopped." You know those moments in films when time slows down? That's what it felt like. Not cinematic. Not poetic. Mechanical. Like something behind the curtain had hit pause. The wind froze. The leaves stopped mid-fall. Even the crickets went silent. And in that stillness, something shifted. A pressure. An awareness. It didn't come from Elias or Glenn or Nancy. It came from beneath the street. From the roots. From the loop itself. I felt it crack. Just a hairline fracture. But enough. Elias took a step forward, voice lower now, more urgent. "You built this, Claire. You asked us to follow your rules. You begged us to make sure you stayed inside the walls. And what exactly," I asked, "was I trying to keep out?" He didn't answer. But I saw it in his eyes. Fear. Not of me. Of what came after me. Of what I was made to contain. I ran. I don't know why. Maybe I was afraid they'd change their minds. Force the vial down my throat. Rip the memories away before they fully took root. Or maybe I needed space to think. To feel. To decide. I ran until the houses disappeared. Past Magnolia Lane. Past the town square. Until the neighborhood loop broke apart and I reached the forest. Again. You might remember this place from earlier. Magnolia Hollow. Where the air feels ancient. Where the trees hum with something that predates language. But this time, it was awake. The forest knew I was coming. I stepped between two massive oaks and the temperature dropped. Not the kind of cold that makes you shiver. The kind that makes your bones remember death. And then I saw it. The circle. Again. But this time, there was something new. Another version of me. Standing at the edge. Dirt-covered feet. Hollow eyes. Same white dress from my vision. She didn't speak. She just stared. Then slowly, she stepped back. Into the circle. And left it open for me. I stepped in. The world bent. Colors ran like paint in the rain. Sound warped. And then clarity. A memory. full, sharp, violent. I was standing in this same circle years ago, surrounded by watchers, elders, architects. A child stood in front of me. Not me. Another girl. She was crying, saying, "I don't want to forget. Please don't make me forget." And I knelt, held her face in my hands, and said, "You'll thank me when you're whole." Then I whispered a phrase into her ear. A phrase I hadn't remembered until that very moment. "You've been very patient." That phrase. The one Nancy used. The one that activated everything. I said it first. To myself. It wasn't a kindness. It was a trigger. The start of the forgetting. And now? I had said no. I had broken it. And the price was coming. The trees around the circle shivered. The ground pulsed. I turned, and there they were. Elias. Nancy. Glenn. All of them. At the edge of the hollow. Not coming closer. Just watching. And behind them? Something else. A shape. Tall. Unclear. Moving wrong. A ripple in space. It wasn't human. It wasn't even pretending to be. It stepped forward slow, patient, as if it had waited centuries. And then I knew. This was what the loop was protecting me from. Not the outside world. Not the truth. But this. The thing inside me. The thing I'd once let in and then begged to forget. It reached the edge of the circle. Didn't enter. But it didn't have to. Because I remembered now. This was the thing I had become. Before I chose to fracture. Before I chose to forget. And it had never left. Just slept. Elias spoke from the edge. "You can still go back." I shook my head. "No. I can't." "Then you have to contain it." "I don't know how." "You do," he said. "You always have." And in that moment, the entire loop folded in. All the cycles. All the choices. Every moment I had lived, every memory I had wiped. And one truth stood out above the rest. I had built this prison for myself. Because I was too afraid of what would happen if I ever remembered everything. And now, I was wide awake. The figure reached forward. It didn't speak. It didn't roar. It simply opened, a wide, lightless grin from a face that didn't have form. And I stepped forward. Not to fight it. To embrace it. Because this wasn't an enemy. It was me. The raw version. The unfiltered core. Not a monster. A memory. And I had denied it for too long. As I stepped into its shadow, the world shattered again. And rebuilt itself. Not around a loop. But around a choice. And in that moment, I finally understood what Elias meant when he said, "This isn't about you." Because it never was. It was about what happens to the world when the listener becomes the voice. And what comes next, no one's ready for. Have you ever heard your own voice, from the outside? Not in a recording. Not in a dream. But in the air around you, spoken by something ancient and immense? That's what happened the moment I stepped into the figure's shadow. Not fear. Not horror. Just a rush. Like my soul broke the surface after being buried for eons. And then, I heard it. My voice. But deeper. Echoed through stone and time. Speaking to the forest. To the earth. To me. You came back. The thing in the dark. The thing that was me didn't look like anything human. It wasn't monstrous either. It didn't need limbs or features or skin. It was intention. It was the first version of me that never forgot. The original voice. And it wasn't here to destroy. It was here to fuse. Why did I build the loop? I asked. The voice answered immediately. To protect the world from what happens when memory becomes power. Isn't that the point? I asked. To evolve? To become more than human? Becoming more, it said, does not mean leaving humanity behind. It means holding on to it while carrying the weight of knowledge. You failed. I failed. You were never meant to erase everything, the voice said. But when the pain came, when you understood too much, you chose silence. You mean? I quit. The voice didn't say yes. But it didn't need to. Because I could see it now. I had evolved. Gone further than any mind should go. I touched truths too vast for one person to bear. And in doing so, I broke. And I asked for mercy. But I didn't just run from the truth. I made sure I'd never reach it again. Unless I was ready. And here I was. The voice moved closer, and I felt the shape of my memories settle into my bones like armor. Images. Symbols. People. Versions of me. The kind, the cruel, the genius, the coward. All of them lived inside me. You fractured to buy time, the voice said. Now you must decide. Decide what? To stay split or unify. I looked past it. Through the forest. Toward the loop. Toward Elias. Toward the world I had made. Unifying would mean ending the loop. No more resets. No more forgetting. But it also meant bearing everything. Pain. Knowledge. Responsibility. Power. No more room to run. Can I carry that? I asked. You already did, it replied. But can you carry it and remain yourself? That's the real question. I felt the weight rise again. Not on my back. Inside my chest. The weight of every life I'd ever lived. Every mistake. Every silence. Every truth I'd erased. But I also felt something else. Fire. Not anger. Resolve. And that's when I finally understood. The loop wasn't my punishment. It was my test. One I'd finally passed. I took the final step. Into the voice. And it didn't swallow me. It joined me. Like water soaking into soil. It became breath in my lungs. Words behind my tongue. The forest stilled. The ground went quiet. And in the space where the voice once stood, I remained. Different. Whole. And finally, awake. I walked back to the loop. No fear in my steps. The trees leaned away. The stars blinked slower. Time, it seemed, was watching me now, waiting to see what I'd do. At the edge of the street, Elias stood waiting. No longer composed. No longer guiding. Just watching. Claire, he said softly, like he wasn't sure if that name even applied anymore. I met his eyes. I'm still Claire, I said. But I'm not the listener anymore. He nodded once. Slowly. What now? I looked back at the neighborhood. All those houses. All those roles. All those people who weren't really people, but reflections of me. Carrying out scripts I wrote in fear. I end it, I said. The loop. Yes. And what comes after? I turned to him. You do. I gathered them all. Glenn. Nancy. Ezra. Allison. The rest. And I told them the truth. About the cycles. The resets. The lies. I told them about me. And what I had become. Most of them were quiet. Some cried. Some begged to stay inside the illusion. But I told them gently. It was never real. And now? It was time to choose for themselves. No more scripts. No more control. Just freedom. Hard, brutal, beautiful freedom. And when I said the final word, the loop collapsed. Like glass melting into itself. The neighborhood dissolved. The forest stepped back. The curtain fell. And I was left. At the beginning. For real this time. No script. No loop. Just me. The one who chose. The one who remembered. The voice. Have you ever lived a life twice? 3 times? 8? What if you did, and you didn't even know? That's the hardest part to explain. Not the memories. Not the rituals. The forest. The stone. The faces. But the forgetting. Because the real tragedy isn't losing yourself. It's choosing to. Over and over again. Until the memory of who you once were becomes a ghost you mistake for intuition. A whisper you call a gut feeling. A truth you swear you almost know, but never quite catch. That's what the loop was. A place I built to not remember. To delay the cost of being more than human, of holding too much, seeing too far. And it worked. Until I shattered it. And what came next is what this story is really about. The morning after the loop collapsed, I woke up on my porch. Alone. No lawnmowers. No sprinkler sounds. No perfectly folded newspaper waiting by the steps. Just silence. But it wasn't hollow anymore. It was honest. I walked through the streets of what used to be Magnolia Lane. The houses were there, but different. Empty. Neutral. No personalities. No watchers. The sidewalks weren't perfectly swept. The air didn't carry lavender. It was just a place now. A place waiting for real life to begin. I checked every house. No Glenn. No Nancy. No Elias. No mirrors. No rolls. Only space. Unwritten. Back at my house, the last one on the curve, I found one thing waiting on the kitchen table. A key. Attached to it was a note. 3 words. From me. Don't lock it. I smiled. A real one. Because I finally understood. I had spent lifetimes building walls to protect the world from the version of me that knew too much. But knowing isn't the danger. Forgetting is. That's how we lose ourselves. Piece by piece. Truth by truth. That's how we let the loops take over. And not just the ones I built. I mean all of them. The lies we live because they're safer. The relationships we stay in because they're familiar. The jobs, the stories, the fake smiles. The versions of ourselves we repeat because changing hurts more than staying asleep. Yeah, those loops. So I left the key on the table. And walked out the door. Not to escape. To start. I didn't go back to the forest. Not because I was afraid. Because I didn't need it anymore. The memory wasn't in the trees. It was in me. And for the first time in maybe forever, I didn't feel like I was being watched. I didn't feel like someone was waiting for me to figure it out. I was the one watching now. Not just the world, but myself. Every thought, every instinct, every quiet decision to slip back into an old habit. And each time I caught it, I chose differently. Even when it hurt. Even when it cost me comfort. Because I had already paid the higher price. I'd paid in years. In versions of myself I'd buried just to survive. No more. I sent a letter. Just one. To no address. No name. I left it on a train seat heading east. Inside, I wrote this. Dear future listener. You may wake up one day and feel like the world knows something you don't. You'll feel behind. Disconnected. You'll hear a voice inside you whisper, you've been very patient. Listen to it. But don't let it own you. The loop wants to continue. But you don't have to. You're allowed to remember. Even if it breaks you. Especially then. I don't know if anyone ever read it. I hope they did. But even if they didn't, I still needed to write it. Because that's how the new cycle begins. Not with forgetting, but with witnessing. You probably want to know what happened to Elias. To Glenn. To Nancy. I don't know. And I think that's the point. They were always pieces of me. Teachers. Reflections. Projections of roles I assigned in the greater play. Now that the story's over, they've returned to whatever they were before I imagined them. Maybe echoes. Maybe dust. Maybe waiting for their next invitation. But I didn't leave mine open. I closed the book. And set it down. And walked away. I still hear the voice sometimes. Late at night. When everything's still. Not loud. Not commanding. Just there. Like a lighthouse in fog. A reminder that I don't have to be afraid of what I am anymore. Because I faced it. And I didn't run. I became it. The listener became the voice. The voice became the truth. And now, I get to live. Not in safety. Not in perfection. But in freedom. And that's worth every broken cycle. So if you've ever walked into a room and felt like everyone knew something you didn't, if someone touched your arm and said, you've been very patient, and it sent a chill down your spine, if you've ever felt the tug of something bigger inside you, don't panic. Don't bury it. Don't drink the vial. Ask the question. What am I forgetting? And then wait. Because the answer may come softly. Or it may come like fire. But either way, when it arrives, you'll finally know what I mean when I say, then he spoke. And everything after was never the same.